Welcome to Double Portion Inheritance with Maria Merola and Gary Wold, brought to you by DoublePortionInheritance.com. Since 1981, Maria heard the call of Yahuwah to become a watchman to the house of Yisrael and to those within the traditional Christian church. She was instructed to warn them against the false doctrines and pagan traditions of men. After 25 years of studying Scripture, the word of Yahuwah came to Maria again in 2007 as she was called out of the corporate world to become a full-time intercessor and prophetic teacher. The name of the ministry, Double Portion Inheritance, was given to her after she received the revelation of the two houses of Yisrael from Ezekiel 37:16. The mission of this ministry is to bring together the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph for the return of the Messiah, Yahushua. And now, Maria Merola.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today is December the 3rd, 2022, and this is part 3 of Remember Lot's Wife. And, the reason I'm spending so much time on this one is because every day when I get on social media, I get so tired of seeing people say, there's no rapture. There's no rapture. I'm like, oh my gosh. I know that the word rapture doesn't exist in our English Bibles, but yes, there's going to be a post-tribulation harpazo to heaven, to Shamayim. The bride will be taken there, yes, but we're only going to be gone during the 10 days of awe, and the bride is coming back with Messiah, riding on white horses with him. But so many people, they don't do their own study. They don't dig into the word. They don't dig into the Hebrew. All they do is they go on Facebook or social media and TikTok or whatever, and they just mimic what they hear other people saying. They'll take a meme. They'll take a quick little 5-minute video and they'll repost it. They'll like, oh, this sounds good. This sounds right. No, what we're supposed to be noble Bereans, like the Apostle Shaul said. Go and study those things for yourself to see if it's true. I can't tell you how many people just mimic and parrot what they hear other people saying, and they don't really dig into it for themselves. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm digging and showing you, yes, there's a pattern in Scripture for being taken in a good, positive way, taken, and those that are left behind are the ones that are the wicked people. But for some odd reason, there's people teaching that the righteous people get left behind and the wicked people are taken someplace. It's not true. So we've been talking about that for 2 weeks, but this is part 3. Okay, so this is where I left off last week. So in Genesis 19:26, we are told that when Lot's family was escaping Sodom and Gomorrah, his wife looked back, even though they were instructed by the Malach, or the angel of Yahuwah, not to do this. Messiah is retelling the account in Luke's gospel, but he also buttresses this with a teaching on who is left and who is taken. So let's take a look. Luke 17:26-27, he says, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives. They were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Now, obviously, the flood didn't come and destroy Noah and his family, okay? Because it says Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. So it sounds like, it's talking about Noah and his family, but we know that's not the case. It's just the way the sentence is structured. Some people might be tempted to think that Noah and his family were destroyed, okay? So, like I said, if you didn't know any better, the way this sentence is worded, it sounds as if Noah and his family were destroyed because it says Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. But who was destroyed? It was they, in other words, the wicked people who were left out of the ark. Luke 17:28 through 29. Likewise, also, as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Okay, so are we seeing the pattern yet? Lot and his family went out, and who was destroyed? Those who were left behind in Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. Okay, Luke 17:30 through 32. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he which shall be upon the housetop and his stuff in the house, let him not come down to take it away. And he that is in the field, let him likewise not return back. And then verse 32 is just remember Lot's wife. Now, why is he saying remember Lot's wife? Let's look at the context. So Yahushua is telling his disciples that whoever's on the rooftop should not go back to get his stuff because they are about to go somewhere. Then he compares those who attempt to stay behind to get their stuff with Lot's wife. If the righteous are not going anywhere and they are going to be left here on earth, then why are they being told that they have to be ready to get away quickly and not go back to get their belongings? Let's keep reading. Luke 17:33 through 37. Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life shall preserve it. I tell you, in that night. Now, why is he calling it night? Because as I've said many times before, the bridegroom comes at midnight when everybody else is asleep. But the bride and her handmaidens are waiting with oil lamps because it's dark. They didn't have street lights back then. So the bride and her handmaidens, her bridesmaids, they were waiting because they knew the bridegroom was coming on a day that no man knows. But even though it was a day that no man knows, the bride had a general idea. She knew by the phrase, the day that no man knows, that he was referring to the Feast of Trumpets. So she knew that sometime whenever that new moon was spotted by the two witnesses, that they were going to be going with the bridegroom. So he says, I tell you, in that night there shall be two in one bed. The one shall be taken and the other left. Now, the word men is not there in the King James Version. It's italicized. So it doesn't say two men. There's people that would try to say, use this as a justification for two homosexual men in one bed together. It's not talking about two men. It just says two people. Okay. Gender is not even mentioned. Same thing here in verse 35. Two women shall be grinding together. It's not two women. It just says two shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken and the other left. The word women, is italicized in the King James Version. Two shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken and the other left. Two shall be in the field. The one shall be taken and the other left. And they answered and said unto him, Where, master? And he said unto them, Wheresoever the body is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Now, in this verse 37, the one I just read, we see that Yahushua is describing to us one person who is taken and the other one is left. We are specifically told to remember Lot's wife. Why? Was she taken somewhere or was she left? She was left, obviously, right? We are told that if we are on the rooftop, don't go down to get our stuff. We are told that if we are in the field, do not turn back. Stay with me on this. We know that in the story of Lot, he and his family were the ones who were taken out of the city, but the wicked people remained. Here in Luke 17, we're told to remember Lot's wife. And right after Messiah says, remember Lot's wife, he goes into this discourse about one shall be taken, one shall be left. One shall be taken, one shall be left. You see, it's because he's comparing Lot's wife, who looked back as she was leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, and so therefore she did not get to escape the wrath of Elohim when she and her family were being taken out of the city. If the wicked people were the ones being taken, then why are we told to remember Lot's wife? Was Lot's wife accounted worthy to escape wrath? No, she was left. She was left there to perish. Okay, so let's talk about other examples in scripture of those who were taken. We know from the record of scripture that Yahweh took Enoch. But where was he taken to? Well, scripture does not tell us where, but we get a clue from the Hebrew word for took. In Bereshit, Genesis 5:24, it says, and Enoch, walked with Elohim, and he was not, for Elohim took him. So let's look at the Hebrew word took in this passage. It's a very strange word, lahak. It's a difficult word to pronounce, lahak. And it means to take in the widest variety of applications, to accept, to bring, to buy, to carry away, drawn, fetch. It means to reserve, to seize, to send for, to take away, to use, to win. You see, these are all positive connotations for the word take. Okay. Interestingly, we see the same Hebrew word, lahak, being used when Elijah, was taken away in a chariot of fire. In 2 Kings 2:16, and they said unto him, behold, now there be with your servants 50 strong men. Let them go, we pray you, and seek your master, lest peradventure the spirit of Yahuwah has taken him up. Okay, this Hebrew word corresponds to the Greek word harpazo, or caught up, in 1 Thessalonians 4:17. The Latin word is of course rapturo, and that's where we get the word rapture, but they mean the same thing. Okay, the word rapturo means to seize, to snatch away, to take, to carry away. Okay, Eliyahu was taken away in a chariot of fire into heaven, which was a foreshadowing of our Messiah's ascension to heaven. Now, Elijah being taken also parallels the future catching away of the elect, the bride, into heaven. 1 Thessalonians 4:17. It is also possible that the prophet Eliyahu was taken to the third heaven outside of his body, which is what is described by Shaul or Paul in 1 Corinthians 12:2-3. Now, I'm going to explain, because some people say, oh, but what about what it says in John 3:13? No man has gone up into heaven. I'm going to explain that. So just stay with me on this explanation. Okay, so it's important to remember that the third heaven, where our Elohim's throne is in another dimension outside of linear time as we know it here on earth. Okay, in Ecclesiastes 12:7, we are told that when a kadoshim, or a saint, dies, their spirit goes back to Elohim who gave it. But it's the body that stays in the dirt and decays in the grave. Okay. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 12:7 briefly so you can see it for yourself. Ecclesiastes 12:7. Okay. And it says, or ever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. This is all, poetic language for death, because, the silver cord is like a metaphor for this invisible cord that ties us to this present carnal world that we live in. So when the silver cord is loosed, it means that our spirit is free to leave the body, right? When it talks about the pitcher broken at the fountain or the wheel broken at the cistern, I've known people who on their deathbed, family members who said, I see the fountain. One family member said, everybody's here. Everybody's here. My son was telling me this just recently when my ex-husband David, who passed, he repented on his deathbed. Well, he actually repented before the deathbed, but he repented prior to his death. But as he was slipping in and out of consciousness, he said, everybody's here. I see the fountain. And my son Jeremy was saying to him, what fountain? He says, and so he began to explain that he saw his mother, he saw his grandmother, he saw his father, all his, relatives, close relatives who had died before him, who were righteous, people who had repented. He could see them at the fountain. Another friend of mine, when her mother died of cancer in 2010, she said she had a dream the next day that she was gathered at this fountain, and she was, in the dream, she was talking to her mother and other relatives who had died before her, and they were all gathered at the fountain. So anyway, this is poetic language, but then in verse 7, it says, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was. Because remember, when Yahuwah formed Adam, he formed Adam from the dust. And then what did he do? He breathed into Adam the breath of life. It says, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit, the word there is ruach, which means breath, okay? And the ruach shall return unto Elohim who gave it, okay? So, while it is true that when a righteous soul dies, their body stays in the dirt, but their spirit goes back to Elohim, according to Ecclesiastes 12:7. This means that time travel is possible outside of linear time. See, when a righteous soul dies, they travel to the future outside of linear time, where all time continuums coexist and converge. We know this because in eternity, we are shown that Yahuwah is the one who is and who was and who is to come. Revelation 1:4-8. He is eternal. For it says in Hebrews 7:3 and also in Psalm 110 verse 4 that he has neither beginning of days nor end of life. In other words, the Hebrew word for eternal, olam, isn't just talking about forever moving forward. It's talking about past, present, and future. So when we leave this time construct that we know of down here on earth, we go into another dimension where there is no past, present, or future. Yeah, we're outside of linear time. So where was the prophet Elijah taken to? Eliyahu the prophet wrote a letter to King Joram in 2 Chronicles 21:12 through 15, which was several years after he was taken up in a chariot of fire. Therefore, it would seem that he was not taken to the third heaven where Elohim's throne is. However, as I already said, it is possible that Elijah was taken in the spirit to the third heaven. You know, the apostle Shaul, Paul, talks about how he said he knew a man who was taken, whether in the body or out of the body. He says, I do not know, but such a one was caught up to the third heaven. Okay. Now, in John 3:13, it says, and no man has ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven. This verse, where our Messiah is having a conversation with Nicodemus, he is speaking about a bodily resurrection because he says, no man has ascended. But a soul is not really a complete human being, because a soul, or the person's spirit, in Hebrew, it's the word neshama. In the Hebrew, the word neshama is describing both the soul and the spirit together. Whereas in the Greek mindset, they separate the soul from the spirit and they treat them as two separate things. But in the Hebrew construct, they're the same. The soul and the spirit are together as what is called a neshama. So when he says no man has ascended, he's talking about a complete human being with the body. So no person has bodily ascended up to heaven because, see, at that point, nobody had ascended yet, and still they haven't, because that day is reserved for a day in the future. Well, we read about it in Ezekiel 37, the valley of the dry bones. Okay, so stay with me. So the above verse is speaking about bodily resurrection. It's not suggesting that righteous souls cannot go to the third heaven outside of their bodies. However, eventually, Elijah did die, and he went to a place where all the quote-unquote Old Testament saints went following death, which is a place called Abraham's bosom. Luke 16:22. Remember, our Messiah talked about all the righteous souls went to this place called Abraham's bosom. Now, at the time when our Messiah spoke the words of John 3:13 to Nicodemus, he had not yet resurrected. However, after his resurrection, he descended to the lower parts of the earth, which is Abraham's bosom. And what did he do? Scripture tells us in Ephesians 4:8 through 9, he gave the gift of salvation to those pre-crucifixion saints. In other words, all those who died prior to his crucifixion, who were righteous souls, but they had not heard the good news of Messiah yet, he went there to preach. Scripture tells us he went to preach to the spirits that were in, Sheol. And thus he brought them with him to heaven, only their souls, not their physical bodies. He brought them with him to heaven as his first fruits wave sheaf offering. Let's look at that. Let's look at Ephesians 4:8 through 9, okay? Because some people I know are probably having a hard time wrapping their brain around this. So let's look at this. Ephesians 4. Oh, I'm in Ezekiel. Hang on a minute. Let me find Ephesians. There we go. It says, wherefore he says, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive. Well, what does that mean? He led captivity captive. Those who were being held captive in the lower parts of the earth, which is Abraham's bosom. And he gave gifts unto men. Well, what gifts? Obviously, it's the gift of salvation. The next verse it says, now he that ascended Where did he ascend to? The Father. What is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens. Far above all heavens is not just talking about the sky. Yeah, there's the first heaven. The first heaven is between Earth's atmosphere and the atmosphere that surrounds the Earth. And then the second heaven is what we would refer to as outer space or the firmament, right? It's a huge expanse. The Hebrew word for firmament is rakia, and it means an expanse. It means it's humongous. It's a huge, vast expanse.
And beyond that isn't that the third heaven, which is what you and I would say is the angelic dimension?
Well, yeah, it's the third heaven is where Yahuwah's throne is, right? Far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. Well, what does that mean that he fulfilled all things? Well, we know that the high priest in Leviticus 23, the high priest was commanded to pick the first cut barley on the first day of the week following Passover, and he was to go in the temple and wave the first fruits sheaf offering, the first cut barley as his first fruits, wave sheaf offering. But now we have Messiah as the high priest, Melchizedek, who did the same thing. But what did he wave? It wasn't barley, it was the souls of men that he waved before the Father. That's what he did. And we have other corroborating scriptures talking about this. Just so you see what I'm referring to, I'm going to use the term first fruits. Looking at all the places in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, where he mentions first fruits. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. It says in Romans 8:23, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Ruach, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, which is the redemption of our body. So, in other words, when we are born again and we are filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, that's the first fruits of our redemption, but we're still awaiting the redemption of our body, which hasn't happened yet. And then I'm looking for other scriptures where it mentions the first fruits. Okay, 1 Corinthians 5:20. But now is Mashiach risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. Now, think about this for a moment. Remember, Elijah the prophet resurrected a little boy. So some might be tempted to say, well, wait a minute. Weren't there others who were raised from the dead prior to Messiah being raised from the dead? Yes, he resurrected Lazarus. He resurrected the daughter of Jairus. But what is this passage telling us? He's the first fruits of them that slept. In other words, he's the first person to bodily resurrect, right? And to put on incorruption. In other words, an immortal body.
Yeah, resurrection back into carnality versus a resurrection into the perfected state.
Right. So, when the prophet Elijah raised that little boy from the dead, that little boy did not receive an incorruptible body. He came back into his finite existence and lived out the remainder of his days until the day that he died. The same thing with Lazarus when Messiah resurrected Lazarus. The same thing with the daughter of Jairus who he resurrected. These people came back into their finite bodies and lived out the remainder of their days on earth until they died. But Messiah is the first fruits of them that slept. In other words, he's the first person to bodily resurrect into heaven. Okay. In 1 Corinthians 15:23, but every man in his own order. Messiah the first fruits, afterward they that are Messiahs at his coming. Oh my goodness, it's telling us right here that when he comes back, he's bringing people with him. Those that are coming back with him are the first fruits, his first fruits. Afterward, they that are Messiahs at his coming. He's bringing us back with him. Let's see. Revelation 14:4. It says, this is talking about the 144,000. It says, these are they which were not defiled with women. This is referring to, this word women is actually a singular word, woman. What this is telling us is that those who are not defiled by the mother harlot church system, they are not defiled by the woman, okay? For they are virgins. This isn't talking about that they're physically virgins. It means that they are spiritually like the wise virgins. They are clean. They are clean because they've repented. They've washed themselves in the blood of the Lamb. Okay. These are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto Elohim and unto the Lamb. So you had the first fruits that Messiah brought with him. After his resurrection, he went into Abraham's bosom. He descended first into the lower parts of the earth, which is Abraham's bosom. And then what did he do? He brought those souls with him to Shamayim. Only their soul, not their body, not their physical body. They have a soul. And then what? All those who died from that time moving forward until Messiah comes back, they're all the first fruits unto Elohim. All those righteous souls who died following his resurrection, who are born from above, born again, their soul goes straight to Shamayim. Their body remains in the dirt. Okay, so therefore nobody has bodily resurrected yet, but post-crucifixion, righteous souls now go to heaven, awaiting the redemption of the body. As I've already pointed out in Romans 8:23, that those who have the first fruits of the Spirit, in other words, we've been born from above, we've been born again, and when we are born again, we have the down payment, which is like the engagement ring. Being filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is like receiving an engagement ring. We're not married yet until we get the same kind of body as our Messiah has. He says, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, the redemption of the body. In other words, we've not been made in the same likeness and image as our bridegroom yet. So we can't marry him yet until we are made of the same substance as him. Because once we are made of the same substance as him, now we can be one flesh with him, right? Incorruptible flesh. So at the future resurrection, all righteous souls will be joined to their incorruptible bodies. And I have another blog called Where Do Redeemed Souls Go When They Die? It's also on YouTube as a video. So I recommend that teaching for those who want to dig deep into that study. Yahushua was taken up to heaven just as his elect, his bride, will be taken up. Okay, now we see in Acts 1:2 through 1:11, it says, until the day in which he was taken up, after that he, through the Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit, had given commandments unto the apostles whom he had chosen. In verse 9, it says, and when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And then in verse 11, it says, you men of Galilee, why stand you gazing up into heaven? This same Yahushua, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as you have seen him go into heaven. So the word here for taken is alanambano, which means to take up, to receive up. The apostle Philip was also caught away alive. Okay, we read about this in Acts 39, and it says in Ma'aseh Shlikim, Acts 8:39, and when they were come up out of the water, the Spirit of Yahuwah caught away Philip, that the eunuch saw him no more, and he went on his way rejoicing. Like I said, the apostle Shaul Paul describes a man who was caught up to the third heaven. He was caught up to paradise. Okay, so when people use John 3:13, they're taking it out of context. No man has bodily ascended yet. This is true. But when we die, we can still be caught up to the third heaven. Paul says, in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell. But, obviously, I don't think it was in the body, because flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Elohim. So if flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Elohim, let me find that passage. We cannot go to the third heaven, Shamayim, in our corruptible bodies. 1 Corinthians 15:50 says, now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Elohim, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. So in other words, the only way we can go to Shamayim, to the third heaven, is if we put on an incorruptible body. Okay, this phrase, when Paul talks about caught up, it's in 2 Corinthians 12. Let me go there quickly. 2 Corinthians 12. It's the word harpazo. It's the same word that is used when it's describing the two witnesses are caught up. After the two witnesses in Revelation 11 are killed and their dead bodies are laying in the streets for 3.5 days, it says they heard a voice from heaven say, come up here. It's the same exact thing. Shaul was saying that he was caught up to the third heaven. Same word, harpazo, okay? In 1 Thessalonians 4:17, let's go there. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians 4 to get some context. 1 Thessalonians 4. For this we say unto you by the word of Yahuwah, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of Yahuwah shall not prevent them which are asleep. So those who are, their bodies are in the graves, but their souls are in Shamayim, we shall not prevent them from being resurrected, is what he's saying. For Yahuwah himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the Malachim, the angel, and with the trump of Elohim, and the dead in Mashiach shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet Yahuwah in the air, and so shall we ever be with Yahuwah. So in other words, all those people that are in the graves, their bodies are in the graves, but their souls are in Shamayim, in the third heaven, we will be caught up together with them and taken to the third heaven, Shamayim, where we will be getting married to the bridegroom. Revelation 12:5, this is talking about the man-child, a man-child, the one new man. Remember the one new man that Paul the Apostle talked about in Ephesians 2:15. He's talking about those that are Yehudim, Jews, and those that are Gentiles, Goyim, those that are born again, that he's made us both as one new man. So when the two witnesses are resurrected, they become the one new man. They become the man-child and her child. Her child is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is called the mother of us all. Her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. This isn't just talking about, a lot of people say, see, we're just whisked away into the sky and taken to the earthly Jerusalem. No. We're not taken to the earthly Jerusalem right away. We're taken first to the third heaven in Shamayim at the throne. Okay, and this is where we are getting married. So we must be born of the same substance as our bridegroom. If he was born into incorruption, if he was born into immortality, then we too, as his bride, must be born into incorruption, into immortality. And where do you suppose we're going to go to put on this body? We're going to go get this body up in Shamayim.
And if we didn't have that body up in Shamayim, then when we came back, we could be the bride that fights beside her husband who dies in battle.
That's right.
Meaning the bride could die in battle.
Right.
But that's not the case.
Right. So the word in all of these verses that I just read to you is harpazo. It means to seize, to catch away, to pluck, to pull, to take by force. The word in Greek for taken in all these verses is paralambano. Okay, paralambano is to receive near, to associate with oneself in a familiar or intimate act or relation, to assume an office, to learn, to receive. Okay, now this word paralambano is what I'm going to be reading to you in Matthew 24:40 through 41, and also in Luke 17:34 through 36. The word for taken is paralambano, to receive near, to associate with oneself in a familiar or intimate act or relation. This is positive. This is not a negative connotation. This is a positive connotation. Okay, so let's read this in Matthew 24:40 through 41. When Yahushua says, then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, paralambano, and the other left. Two shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, paralambano, and the other left. Same thing in Luke 17:34 through 36. I tell you, in that night, there shall be two in one bed. The one shall be taken, paralambano. The other shall be left. Two shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken, paralambano. And the other left. Two men shall be in the field. The one shall be taken, and the other left. See, this is clearly showing in these verses that Yahuwah will take his elect, his bride, unto himself in a familiar and intimate way, to assume an office. What kind of office? Well, Revelation 1:6 and Revelation 5:10 tells us we shall be called kings and priests, right? If we're going to be called kings and priests, are we not assuming an office? Yes. He's going to take unto himself his bride in a familiar or intimate way to assume an office as kings and priests. But now let's look at the word for left in these two verses, Matthew 24:40 through 41, and also Luke 17:34 through 36. The word for left in these verses is aphemi. Aphemi, listen to what it says. It says to send forth in various applications, to cry, to be forsaken, to lay aside, to leave, to let alone, to omit, to send away. These are not positive connotations for the word left. So, when I see people on social media saying, I want to be left behind. I don't want to be taken. I want to be left behind, because they think they're so smart, and they think there's not going to be any, harpazo at all. And they're like, no, I want to be left behind. I'm like, oh, okay. So you want to be forsaken then? You want to be like the foolish virgins who got left out of the wedding? Okay. that sounds silly, but see, they don't know what they're saying. They haven't done a deep dive into this. Okay. They're just learning from other people. They're parroting what they hear other people on social media saying.
That's the important word, parroting.
Yes. So this is not a good connotation of being left, as we can see by the synonyms. You see, we're either going to be left here on earth to be eaten by the birds, because see, those wicked people that are left out of the marriage, they are gathered together to the battle of Armageddon. Well, they will be killed and then eaten by the birds. So you're either going to be left here on earth to be eaten by the birds, or you will be taken up to heaven to meet Yahuwah in the air. See, if you are one of those who are counted worthy to escape the wrath to come, you will be taken into the heavenly tabernacle to be changed into immortality. Okay, as the bride is taken to a safe place, just like Noah and his family were taken up from the earth, protected in the ark. Okay, 7 days later, remember, Noah and his family were taken into the ark, and for 7 days they waited before the rain began to fall, before the wrath came in the form of rain. The same pattern will be repeated, where the bride will be taken to a safe place in heaven, Shamayim, for 7 days, and then she's coming back. See, the bride will return to earth to rule and reign with Messiah as one of his kings and priests. In other words, to assume an office. See, this is the precise meaning of the word paralambano, taken. It's a positive taken in an intimate way, to assume an office. There's no other conclusion that we can make from these two words, taken or left.
I think there's an important thing that we should all remember and try to share with others when we come across this. No one wants to be kidnapped by a bad guy, right? No one wants to be abducted and taken by a bad guy.
Right.
But who's doing the taking?
Mm-hmm.
It's Yahuwah.
Right.
So if the good guy says someone will be taken, and where he resides is the Shemayim, the heavens, the throne, and if that New Jerusalem doesn't come back down to earth, I shouldn't say back like the New Jerusalem was ever here. The carnal Jerusalem is here. So if the New Jerusalem is going to come to earth at the end of the millennium, in the 8th millennium, so roughly a little over 1,000 years from now, as we would speculate, then you have to wrestle with the fact that there is a harpazo, and if that harpazo is before 1,000 years from now, then we have to be taken to another destination, which is heaven.
Right.
Period. Those two have to go together.
Let's look at Revelation 19, 7 through 14. Okay, it says, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the Kadoshim, okay, the saints. And he says unto me, write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he says unto me, these are the true sayings of Elohim. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. Verse 14, it says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Now, I've talked to people that say, oh, no, those are angels. Oh, really? So where does it tell us in any of these verses that the angels are clothed in fine linen, white and clean? It doesn't. The ones that are arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, are the Kodeshim, the saints. They're the ones that are clothed in fine linen. So the armies that follow him, which were in heaven, they're following him on white horses. They are clothed in fine linen, white and clean, which we previously learned is the righteousness of the Kodeshim. So what are we seeing in these verses? We are seeing an army called the wife of the Lamb, and they are coming back with Yahushua riding white horses. Why are they coming back? Where have they been that they are coming back with him? Well, as we previously mentioned, they were caught up to meet him in the air, to be changed, to put on incorruption, to put on immortality. Okay? And we've already read this from 1 Thessalonians 4, so I'm not going to read it again. In Revelation 19, it says in verse 15, and out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Elohim. And he has on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Master of Masters. And I saw a malach, an angel, standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great Elohim, that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. So the birds are being gathered together by a malach, an angel of Yahuwah, to do what? To eat the flesh of all the wicked people that were gathered. Where were they gathered to? They were gathered to the battle of Armageddon. Are these people taken? Were they taken away from the earth? No. The wicked people will be left here on earth as prey for the birds. Okay, so in Revelation 19 through 21, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. Okay, what we are seeing here in Revelation 19 is that the bride is coming back on white horses with Yahushua to earth. He then calls for the birds of the air to eat the carcasses of the wicked people of the earth, and the animals to be eaten as well. Those who are being eaten are the ones who will be left here on earth for the great day of wrath, while the bride was counted worthy to escape the wrath of Elohim. Luke 21:36. All right, going back to this question that the disciples are asked our Messiah when they said, where, Lord, where? Okay, because when he goes on his explanation about who gets taken and who gets left, one shall be taken, the other shall be left. They ask him this question, where? Automatically, people assume that the question is, where will they be taken? But what if I told you that the where is, where will they be left? So the question the disciples asked Yahushua about where they shall be left now makes sense in light of reading Revelation 19. Two shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. And they answered and said unto him, where, master? And he said, wherever the body is, there will the eagles be gathered together. So the ones that are taken away from the earth is the bride, but the ones that are gathered to this battle, but they'll still be down here on earth, they're the ones that are going to be left down here on earth, and they will die, and then their bodies will be eaten. Okay. So, some people read these verses to mean that the bodies of the wicked people are taken somewhere to be eaten by the eagles. But those who are taken are those who go into the marriage. The ones who are left are the ones who don't get to be in the wedding because their oil lamps ran out of oil. The ones that are left are here when the wrath of Yahuwah is poured out upon the earth. Now, of course, there's those foolish virgins that are told to go buy the oil, and we believe those have to do with Smyrna. Our Messiah talked about to Smyrna, and he said, be faithful to the end. He said that some of you will be cast into prison and some of you will be killed. So there's going to be those foolish virgins who they go and buy the oil after the wise virgins go into the marriage. They go buy the oil of his name, and they are, cast into prison or killed. And they will still have a chance to be saved, but they will not make it into the harpazo. They will be meeting him at the Mount of Olives. So after the wrath of Yahuwah is poured out, their dead bodies are prey for the eagles, the wicked people that got left out of the marriage. Therefore, the where in Luke 17:36 through 37 is asking where they will be left, not where they will be taken. This is where people get confused. They're like, where will they be taken? Where will they be left? Well, they never indicate. They just say, where, master? So we have to wonder, do they mean where will they be taken or where will they be left? Well, first he says one shall be taken and then the other is left. So the ones that are left, that comes second. And they answered and said unto him, where, master? And he said, wherever the body is, there will the eagles be gathered together. So in other words, the ones that are taken away from the earth is the bride, and the ones that are left here on earth to be killed and then eaten by the birds, they are the ones that are left. So when the question is asked, where, master, where? The question is, where will they be left? We see the same account being spoken of in the prophet Isaiah 18. Let's read this. Isaiah 18, 1 through 6. Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sends ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, saying, go, you swift messengers, to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning, hereto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled. All you inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, see you when he lifts up an ensign on the mountains, and when he blows a trumpet, hear you. For so Yahuwah said unto me, I will take my rest, and I will consider in my dwelling place like a clear heat upon herbs, and like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. For before the harvest, when the bud is perfect, and the sour grape is ripening in the flower, he shall both cut off the sprigs and with pruning hooks, and take away and cut down the branches. They shall be left together unto the fowls of the mountains. So, in other words, the wicked people shall be left together unto the fowls of the mountains, and the beasts of the earth, and the fowls shall summer upon them, and all the beasts of the earth shall winter upon them. You see, the wicked people shall be left together unto the fowls of the mountains to be eaten. And then in verse 7, it says, in that time shall the present be brought unto Yahuwah of hosts of a people scattered and peeled, and from a people terrible from their beginning hereto, a nation meted out and trodden underfoot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of Yahuwah of hosts, the Mount Zion. Those that are taken, brought to Yahuwah, they are taken to the heavenly Mount Zion in the New Jerusalem. Now, I want to talk about the bride being taken to Mount Zion in heaven to marry the king. Now, this is a reenactment that somebody did about how an ancient Hebrew wedding was conducted. The bride is carried in this thing that looks like a canopy, right? She's escorted. This is how they did things in the ancient Hebrew wedding. The bride is carried away, taken, okay? In an ancient Hebrew wedding, the groom comes in the middle of the night to seize and carry away his bride. He sends his men ahead of him to carry her. This illustration is a reenactment of an ancient Hebrew wedding where the bride is escorted to the bridegroom's father's house. The bridegroom has already prepared a honeymoon suite for her, as he describes in John 14:2-3. The canopy that the bride is carried in is called an aperion. An aperion. That's what this thing is called, an aperion. Zola Levitt, he's a deceased messianic teacher. This is what he wrote. He said, she waited at home every night. He's talking about the bride to be. She certainly didn't want to be caught away from home when the bridegroom came. The tradition was that he would come at night, even at midnight, and try to take her by surprise. Matthew 24:42-44. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your master will come. You must be ready, for the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Yes, suddenly one night the groom would come. The bride's father and brothers would ensure it was the man with the marriage contract. Then look the other way while the two of them and all their friends eloped. They were all whisked away into the night to begin the reception. Would they have no warning at all? Well, just this much. When the groom's party was close, they would shout. See, and this is what the Day of Trumpets is all about. The Day of Trumpets is also referred to as a day of blowing or a day of shouting, right? So when the groom's party was close, they would shout, and when the bride heard the shout, she was as good as married. The bride, for her part, did a lot of waiting. Custom required her to be ready, have an oil lamp ready in case he came in darkness. She was to be ready to travel at a moment's notice. The bride would assemble her bridesmaids and whoever would go with her to the wedding. They were all to have oil lamps ready.
So it just occurred to me, the bridegroom comes at midnight to take or snatch away his bride to the room or the addition he prepared in his father's house, where they'll live and they'll consummate a honeymoon for 7 days.
Uh-huh.
Among men or mankind, what practical purpose would this custom serve? The bride being taken unannounced at midnight. If another suitor may want this virgin or damsel for themselves, and they're saving for the bride price, if another suitor knows the engagement and the identity of the groom and the planned time and date of the marriage, then this jealous suitor, another suitor, may plot, lie in wait, and kill the groom before the date comes so that he can have the virgin, the damsel, for himself. So what did happen? Hasatan did plot to kill our Messiah, our bridegroom, but he did not understand the Messiah's planned death and resurrection. So Hasatan is the other jealous suitor. He thought he could kill the groom and gain the bride, or gain her worship, for himself. Now, I typed this in the chat, and Dan Brennan basically, I'm paraphrasing, he says, Hasatan is that jealous suitor, and the bride price could be the earth, which he owns right now. And most people go that way. They choose that other suitor. So if the damsel or virgin won't have the jealous suitor, in his fury, he would rather kill her than let her marry the first betrothed groom. So Hasatan would rather kill this damsel who's engaged to Messiah instead of letting Messiah have her.
It's a great insight, because that's one of the things that Zola Levitt brought out in his study of the ancient Hebrew wedding. So it says they would wait at her house every night on the chance that the groom would come and sweep them all away to a sudden wedding ceremony. When the father deemed all to be ready, the bridegroom would assemble his friends and set out into the night. The Hebrew brides were stolen. As the party would get close to her house, they were required to give her a warning. Someone in the party would shout. When the shout was heard, the bride and her party were to go out to meet the bridegroom. Okay? So they had to wait to hear the shout. And that's exactly what happens in Revelation 11. Go with me when it talks about the two witnesses. What happens? It says, and after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from Elohim entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them, and they heard a voice from heaven. There we go. There's the shout, saying unto them, come up here. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Okay. And then we read in this verse right here, verse 15, and the seventh malach, the seventh angel, sounded. Why? Because every month is ushered in with the sound of a shofar. We're supposed to blow up the trumpet at every new moon. Okay? And so the seventh angel would be the seventh month. This is the first day of the seventh month of Etanim or Tishri. In other words, the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, so does the concept of the catching away exist in the Tanakh or the Old Testament? To those who insist that there won't be a post-tribulation harpazo, or in Latin, rapturo, right? You do not understand the concept of making aliyah. Many of us have heard this phrase, to make aliyah. In Judaism, they mean aliyah, meaning to come up higher, to come into Torah obedience. Or in other words, to move to Israel, to move to the promised land. That's another meaning for making aliyah. But the word aliyah means to ascend, right? Ascension is the only way to be changed to Israel, just like Jacob. Jacob's DNA and his name were changed. You see, The spiral staircase that Jacob saw in his dream is exactly what the human DNA looks like. Jacob's ladder or staircase symbolizes the restored DNA of a human being. When we are born again of incorruptible seed, 1 Peter 1:23 talks about us being born again of incorruptible seed. Jacob's fallen sinful nature was changed when he wrestled with a man all night long, and it says he came face to face with Elohim. See, he wrestled all night with a man, but when he had finished his wrestling, he said that he had come face to face with Elohim. This can only mean one thing. The man that Jacob wrestled with was no ordinary man. It was the pre-incarnate Messiah, Yahushua, who he wrestled with. And his life was preserved. Genesis 32:30. Here's a little graphic I made. You see the DNA with the double helix, and then over here you see this staircase where the Malach was ascending and descending on the staircase. Now, when we read this account, it sounds like there were more than one angel, more than one, Malach ascending and descending the staircase, but it could have only been one because the singular word is just one Malach. So stay with me on this. Elohim was letting down his ladder, his DNA, to the earth so that Jacob might ascend or make Aliyah. This would enable Jacob to communicate with Elohim through a direct portal to Shamayim, to heaven. After his DNA was changed, his name also was changed to Israel. Now I know it's Yasharal, but I just say Israel because there's so many people that if I say Yasharal, they won't know what I'm saying. They won't understand. So I use the word Israel to make it more understandable. Why did Yahweh change his name? Because once he had wrestled with Elohim, he proved himself to be an overcomer. You see, scripture tells us that Jacob prevailed with Elohim. See, the name Israel or Yasharal comes from a root word, Sarah. Sarah, Sarah's name. That word means to prevail, to have power as a prince. You see, Jacob, when he wrestled, he was an overcomer. He prevailed. In 1 Yehukanan, John 5:4, it says, "For whatsoever is born of Elohim overcomes the world." And this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. Also in 1 Yehukanan, 1 John 5:5, it says, "Who is he that overcomes the world but he that believes that Yahushua is the Son of Elohim?" In Hazon, Revelation 2:7, it says, "He that has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach, the Spirit, says unto the assemblies. To him that overcomes will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of Elohim." In Hazon, Revelation 2:11, it says, "He that has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach or the Spirit says unto the assemblies. He that overcomes shall not be hurt of the second death." Okay, and then in verse 17, in 2:17, it says, "He that has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach or the Spirit says unto the assemblies. To him that overcomes will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written." A new name. You see, if you're an overcomer, just like Jacob was, you get a new name written, which no man knows saving he that receives it. So Jacob's name was changed when his nature was changed. The same is true of those who overcome. You see, because like I said, the name Yasharal or Israel means to overcome, to prevail. That's what the name Yasharal or Israel means, to be an overcomer, to prevail. So when Jacob wrestled with Elohim, his name was changed because his DNA was also changed. His nature, his very nature was changed. That was Jacob's born again experience. In Bereshit, Genesis 28:12, Jacob dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the Malach of Elohim ascending, Aliyah. Okay, see that word in Hebrew for ascending is Aliyah, and descending on it. Jacob saw in a dream the Malach, the messenger of Elohim, ascending Aliyah on a ladder or a staircase to Shamayim, to heaven, and then descending. Jacob saw the Messiah. I believe that that's who the Malach was, the one that was ascending and descending on this ladder. You know, we read it and we think it's angels, plural, but it can be a singular Malach, which would be Messiah, Yahushua. He's the messenger. I believe Jacob saw the Messiah, Melchizedek, in his pre-incarnate visible image, ascending, Aliyah. In other words, ascending up and down the spiral staircase that resembles a human DNA. In Proverbs 30, verse 4, we read that it is the Son who ascends and descends. It's the Son. It says in Proverbs 30, let's go there, Proverbs 30. Who has ascended into heaven or descended? You know, and this word ascended is aliyah. Who has ascended into heaven or descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has bound the waters in a garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is his son's name, if you can tell? So it's the Son who ascends and descends. We read this also in Ephesians 4:4 through 8. 4:4 through 8. Our Messiah ascended, made Aliyah, after he first descended into the lower parts of the earth, Abraham's bosom. To do what? To redeem those righteous souls, to give gifts unto men. After this, he ascended. He made Aliyah with his Kodeshim, his saints, as his first fruits, wave sheaf offering, and presented them at the throne before the Father. You see, after the corporate two witnesses are killed in Revelation 11, it says they heard a voice from heaven saying, "Come up here." And they ascended. They made Aliyah up to heaven in a cloud. And Revelation 12:5 says, "And she," meaning Jerusalem, "brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child," which is one new man, you know, the man-child, "was caught up." That word is harpazo in Greek. "Caught up unto Elohim and to his throne." Revelation 11:12. It says they ascended, anabeno is the Greek word, anabeno, to go up, to arise, to ascend. This would be the equivalent to the Hebrew word aliyah. So you see, resurrection from the dead does not necessarily result in putting on incorruption. As I've said before, when our Messiah resurrected Lazarus and Jairus' daughter, they came back into their finite bodies and lived out the remainder of their earthly lives before dying. The term harpazo means the same thing as the Latin rapturo, which is more specific than a resurrection because it is equivalent to making aliyah, which means to ascend. You see, the concept of being taken up and away is either the Hebrew word lahak or aliyah. Okay, we see a precedent for it in the Tanakh. You know, as I've already said in 2 Kings 2:9, the prophet Elijah, was asked by the prophet Elisha. He says, "What shall I do for you before I be taken away?" And in Hebrew, that word taken away is lahach. And Elisha, the prophet, asks for a double portion of his spirit. He says, "I pray you, let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." And then in verse 11, it says, "And it came to pass as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up." Aliyah. Okay. Now that word is the Hebrew word aliyah. When it says he went up, he made aliyah by a whirlwind into heaven. This word, whirlwind, is the Hebrew word sa'ar, which means a hurricane, a storm, a tempest. Now, it would appear that the prophet Elijah, was taken with a chariot and horses that were made of fire. I believe this was a supernatural experience because a chariot made of fire would obviously burn somebody, but this was obviously the kind of fire that Moses saw when the burning bush, was burning, but it didn't get consumed. So he's taken away in a supernatural chariot and horses made out of fire. This was a supernatural experience whereby Yahuwah was taking him to the third heaven, I believe, via a portal. Just like when Jacob saw that staircase. I believe that the prophet Elijah was taken via a portal. Okay, it's described as a whirlwind. Just the same thing happened to Enoch. I suspect that these two men were taken in the spirit, as is described in Ecclesiastes 12:7. But this was not a bodily resurrection because that event hasn't taken place yet. Okay, that's why our Messiah told Nicodemus in John 3:13, "No man has ascended, but only the Son has ascended," because he's the only one that is bodily ascended yet. Okay, until the harpazo, in Ezekiel 37, the valley of the dry bones, no man has ascended yet bodily. Okay, but the day is coming when our body, which is in the grave, we will come out of our graves. Yahuwah will put new skin on us, new flesh on us, and we will receive a new incorruptible body. And our spirit and our soul, our neshama, will be joined to our bodies. And so we know this because Romans 8:23 tells us we've only received the first fruits of our redemption, which is the indwelling of the Ruach HaKodesh, which is like our engagement ring. But we haven't received the redemption of the body yet. And like I said, John 3:13 gives us insight that the bodily resurrection of the Kadoshim, the saints, is reserved for that day that we read about in Ezekiel 37:1-14, and also in 1 Corinthians 15:50-54. In the meantime, we know for certain that all righteous souls that die are taken immediately out of the body to the third heaven. Now, think about this. The Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:6, he says, "Therefore we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from Yahuwah. And then in verse 8, he says, we are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with Yahuwah. Okay, so when we die, when righteous souls die, our soul's not sleeping. That soul sleep doctrine is a construct of the Seventh-day Adventists. They're wrong about that. Our soul's not sleeping. When righteous souls die, we are absent from the body and we are present with Yahuwah. Only our soul goes to Shamayim, our neshama. Our soul and our spirit go to Elohim in heaven. And we await the resurrection of the body, the redemption of the body, which hasn't happened yet. It will happen as described in Ezekiel 37. I want to talk about the chronology of how these things are going to unfold as they relate to the festival, the feast days, the ancient Hebrew wedding customs, and the prophetic feasts. So traditionally, there were 7 men who were in charge of escorting the bride. 4 of them were at each corner of the canopy, carrying the bride. This is a reminder of the 4 Malachim, the 4 angels who are assigned to gather the elect from the 4 winds with a great sound of a trumpet. As I've said, this is a reenactment of an ancient Hebrew wedding. The canopy in which the bride is taken away to the home of the bridegroom's father is called an aperion. Okay, that's what it's called. In fact, I got this information from this website right here. This is from 2018. It says, Reviving Biblical Wedding Customs in Preparation for the Third Temple. And what these people did was they actually found archaeological evidence for how the bride was escorted to the bridegroom, and they reconstructed the aperion. It says here, when the temple is built, we'll replace it with a 14-karat gold crown. Because see, the bride, they made a crown for the bride, and the crown looks like the walls of Jerusalem. So for now, they made the crown out of brass. But the guy who's talking in this article says when the temple is built, we'll replace it with a 14-karat gold crown. And see, that makes sense because it talks about the queen of Ophir in the book of Song of Solomon, how she's given precious gold and things. And that's like Abraham's servant who brought gold earrings and jewelry to Rebecca before he brought Rebecca to Isaac, Yitzhak, right? So this guy whose last name is Prager, I don't think it's Dennis Prager, it's some other guy with the last name Prager, says Prager made a huppah hatanim from crimson silk decorated with fine beaten gold work. He had 4 ornately carved wood poles made for suspending the huppah hatanim. And that's what they call this device that they carry the bride in. It's called a huppah hatanim. In English, they call it the aperion. Okay. The aperion proved to be a far greater challenge, requiring 9.5 years and $30,000 to build. Imagine. In order to make it look just like the original, it took them 9.5 years and $30,000 to build this thing. He said, we wanted to be just like the Song of Songs, Prager explained. We sent a guy through Amman, Jordan, to Damascus to pick up a roll of silk and gold brocade material that was made for King Fahd of Saudi Arabia. An extra roll was on the black market for thousands of dollars, and we bought it. We sweated for 10 days, worried it might get seized or stolen before making it to Israel. So you see, this isn't just, a figment of our imagination. This isn't just, speculation. They found archaeological evidence that this is how the bride was taken. The bride was seized. She's literally taken. Okay. It was romantic. It was romantic. So usually the bridegroom would send 7 men to escort the bride. And 2 of them were leading the caravan with shofars. There was 4 of them carrying the bride. This kind of reminds me of the 7 trumpets that were in front of the Ark of the Covenant when they walked around the walls of Jericho. See, the bride being carried to the bridegroom on the Aperion is very similar to the priests in the book of Joshua who carried the Ark of the Covenant 7 times around the walls of Jericho as they blew trumpets. No doubt, this probably took place on the Feast of Trumpets. Now, it doesn't tell us in the book of Joshua what time of year it was, but based on all the evidence, I would gather that this was probably on the Day of Trumpets when the walls of Jericho came down. And the 7 priests, it says in Joshua 6:4, and the 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns, and the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. Now, what follows is a chronological timeline of how I see the end time events unfolding in Scripture. Okay, so the first thing is the abomination of desolation must be seen in the Jerusalem temple before the Great Tribulation can even begin. We read this in Daniel 8:11, Daniel 12:11, Matthew 24:15 through 21, Revelation 11:1 through 2. The Great Tribulation will begin the moment that we see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place. This will kick off the 1,260-day ministry of the 2 witnesses. Now, I know people say, but I thought it was the V. The V is the abomination of desolation. Yes, it is a type and shadow of the abomination to the human body. I'm in agreement. In fact, I'm one of the first people that recognized that and I made a graphic explaining just because there's an abomination to the human body does not mean that there also won't be one that we can physically see. Okay, so you can read what it says at the heading. I'm not going to read it out loud. But yes, we see the first abomination, which happened on December 25th, 167 BC. Antiochus Epiphanes, defiled the temple, sacrificed a pig on the altar, set up an image of Zeus. His image was on the temple coin. The same thing happened again in the Roman siege. The armies of General Titus did the same thing. They offered up unclean animals, pigs on the altar. Nero Caesar's image was on the temple coin. They set up an image of the eagle, the Roman eagle standards, as well as an image of Caesar. Caesar also believed that he was the reincarnation of the pagan sun god born on December 25th. So December 25th is always associated with these events. And then, of course, the 4th abomination of desolation in Jerusalem, I believe, will be when DJT, he's the one that was asked to build the temple. But in 2020, there was a 3rd abomination, which DJT rolled out. When did he roll it out? He rolled it out on December 25th, 2020. In fact, he even called it a great Christmas miracle. You can see by the ingredients that there's unclean animals in this substance, this serum. And, we are told in Leviticus 11, 4 through 47, not to consume these things, that they are unclean. And Yahuwah says, you shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creeps, neither shall you make yourselves unclean with them, that you should be defiled thereby, for I am Yahuwah your Elohim. And so, I made this graphic on March 21st, 2020. So, yes, I recognize that this is an abomination to the human temple, but that doesn't change the fact that we're still awaiting a literal abomination that's going to be seen in the temple. Well, that's just an artist's depiction, but it's just all I could seem to find on Google, right? So it's like, there's the false prophet. He's causing fire to come down from heaven. There's an image made to the beast. People are made to worship this golden image. So the beast will concurrently have a false ministry that lasts for 42 months. Revelation 13:5. The ministry of the two witnesses will be patterned after our Messiah's ministry that was also 3.5 years. We read about that in Luke 4:25. Yahushua was seen at the Mount of Transfiguration with both Moshe and Elijah. That's in Matthew 17:3 through 4. Thus, the corporate two witnesses will operate in the anointing of Moshe and Elijah. Revelation 11:6. Eliyahu also had a ministry that lasted for 3.5 years, at the end of which he raised up the widow's son from the dead after praying for him 3 times. This is a pattern because why? Our Messiah was 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The two witnesses are raised after 3 days and a half as well. Okay, number 2, the resurrection of the two witnesses. The ministry of the two witnesses will last for 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years, at the end of which they will be killed by the beast and then raised up after 3 days, just like our Messiah. This is when the last trumpet will be sounded. 1 Corinthians 15:51 through 53. Also, Revelation 11:15. This will be on the Feast of Trumpets in the 7th month, when the 7th Malach, the 7th angel, sounds the shofar. This is when the two witnesses are taken up, harpazo, to heaven as the corporate man-child, or the resurrected one new man. Ephesians 2:15. Revelation 11:12 says, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying, come up here. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. In Revelation 12:5, the woman is Jerusalem, and she brings forth a man-child. That's the one new man that Paul talked about in Ephesians 2:15. The resurrected man-child, the one new man. We are going to rule and reign with Messiah for 1,000 years. And it says, and her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. See, the bride will not be going back to Mount Sinai in Arabia. A lot of people teach this. They teach that the bride's going back to Mount Sinai. Here's why I don't believe that. In Galatians 4:22 through 26, Paul likens Mount Sinai to Hagar and to bondage. Why? Because it was at Mount Sinai that Israel refused to hear the voice of Yahweh. They didn't want to hear his voice. Not only that, when Moses came back down with the tablets, they were worshiping the golden calf there. In other words, they placed themselves into bondage. But see, the free woman is a picture of Sarah. Sarah is likened to the heavenly Jerusalem, which is above. Therefore, the bride is taken to Mount Zion in the heavenly Jerusalem. In fact, in Hebrews 12:22, it says, but you are come unto Mount Zion and unto the city of the living Elohim, the heavenly Yerushalayim, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of malachim, angels. Also, as Revelation 14:1 describes the 144,000, it says, "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads." Okay. Number 3, a 7-day honeymoon in the heavenly chuppah. You see, the wedding of our Messiah and his bride will follow the pattern of the wedding between Jacob and Leah. This only lasts for 1 literal week. Remember, in Genesis 29:27 through 28, when Jacob realized that he married Leah and he was supposed to be given Rachel, he confronted his father-in-law Laban and said, "Why did you trick me?" And Laban said, "Fulfill the week with Leah, and I'll let you have Rachel also." See, this is when the bride that typifies Leah, and she also typifies the wise virgins, will be caught up and changed into immortality or incorruption. The 5 foolish virgins who are not ready will be caught off guard by the thief in the night. And it says they shall not escape in 1 Thessalonians 5:2 through 3. Those who are not ready to go into the marriage will be caught off guard by the thief in the night. And it says they shall not escape. However, the 5 wise virgins are ready to go into the marriage, and the door will be shut. Once the wise virgins are in the in the wedding chuppah with the bridegroom, the door is shut. We read that in Matthew 25:10 and also in Revelation 3:7 through 8. Philadelphia has the open door that no man can shut. You see, the bride that typifies Leah, she also represents the 5 wise virgins and Philadelphia. She also symbolizes the 10 northern tribes of Ephraim. These shall be taken up to heaven to the bridegroom's father's house, where he has prepared a chuppah, a honeymoon suite for her. Remember, in John 14:2 through 3, he says, "I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you shall be also." See, the bride will be taken up to Shamayim, to heaven, for a 7-day honeymoon, just like Jacob and Leah. Samson's wedding also lasted for 7 days. That's in Judges 14:12. A traditional Hebrew wedding lasts for 7 literal days, as the bride and groom elope in secret, and they go at midnight when everyone is asleep. Matthew 25:6. In 1 Corinthians 15:51, we are told at this event that this event is a mystery. It's a secret. This is why in 1 Corinthians 15:51, Shaul says, "Behold, I show you a mystery." That word in the Greek is mysterion. Mysterion means a secret. So when you hear people in Hebrew roots saying, "Oh, there's no such thing as a secret rapture," yes, there is. If the church is wrong about the timing of this event, they think it's pre-tribulation. They're wrong about the timing, but they're not wrong about the fact that it is a secret. The bridegroom comes at midnight when everybody's asleep and kidnaps the bride in the middle of the night. That's the reason why the Apostle Shaul calls it a mystery, a secret. Okay? So the Greek word for mystery is mysterion, which means a secret. Also, in Psalm 81:7, it says, you called in trouble. That word means tribulation. And I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I proved you at the waters of Meribah. In Psalm 91:1, it says, "He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." In Shir HaShirim, Song of Solomon 2:14, it says, "O my dove, that are in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the stairs." The stairs. See, that's just like Jacob's ladder. Okay? In the secret places of the stairs. There's a portal that he takes us through this portal to the Shamayim, to heaven. In the secret places of the stairs, let me see your countenance. Let me hear your voice, for sweet is your voice and your countenance is comely. Okay, number 4. The return of the bride and groom on Yom Kippur. Yahushua will come back to earth with his bride, who is also his army. See Revelation 19, 7 through 8, and also Revelation 19, 14. Also Ezekiel 37, 10 through 11. At this time, Yahushua will also marry the ones who typify Rachel or Smyrna, and the foolish virgins who purchased the oil of his name. Song of Solomon 1:3 says, your name is like oil poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love you. Matthew 25:9 says that the wise virgins counsel the foolish ones to go and buy the oil. Okay, so this means that after the wise virgins go into the wedding, the foolish virgins will have a chance to go buy the oil during those 10 days of awe between the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement. Okay, now I want to address something that just came to my mind, because I know a lot of people will try and argue that the bride cannot be coming back as the army, because they say, well, that's not possible, because in Deuteronomy 24, it tells us that during the first year of marriage, that the husband may not go out to war for the first year of their marriage. Right here in Deuteronomy 24:5, it says, when a man has taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home for 1 year and shall cheer up his wife, which he has taken. Okay, the thing that's different here is that in this instance, the bridegroom could be taken away, and she could not have a child yet, a male heir, and she would not, if the groom got killed in battle, she would have no male heir whereby she could inherit the land. So there has to be a 1-year period where he could at least impregnate her with a male heir, and therefore she could have a male heir, where if the husband did get called to war and he died in battle, that she would have a way to inherit the land. But see, here's the thing. When Messiah comes, he's going to be in an immortal body, and his bride will also be in an immortal body. So there's no concerns about him dying in battle, and there's no concerns about the bride dying in battle. They're going to be together. They're going to be fighting together. So this Torah command doesn't apply in the situation with the bride and the groom, because they're both going to be immortal, and their bodies will be indestructible. As a matter of fact, if we go to Proverbs 31, starting with verse 10, we can see the whole entire description of Proverbs 31, 10 through 31 is describing the perfect bride, the perfect wife, who's the Messiah's bride. And the first thing he says is, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Now let's look at this word, virtuous. This word virtuous in Hebrew is keil, and it means a force. It means an army, valor, strength, an army, a band of men, a band of soldiers. Okay? And there's another passage that I want to bring out. I believe it's when it says that Adam was given a helpmeet. I think it's all one word, but I'm not sure. Yes. Genesis 2:18. Genesis 2:18. Look at what it says. Genesis 2:18. The Hebrew word For help, help is Azar, which means aid, but the word meet, neged, says a front, a military front. Let's look at that word, 5048, Strong's Concordance, 5048. So when it says that Adam was given a helpmeet, that word, helpmeet, it says a front, like a military front, right? In other words, she's his army. So we've got lots of witnesses in scripture that the bride is going to be the Messiah's army. In fact, even in Ezekiel 37, when it says that all those people who had died, their dry bones are come out of the graves, and Ezekiel's told to prophesy to the bones, and they shall live. And what does it say? It says, "Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live." So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Wow. So the whole house of Israel. He says it in the next verse. He says, "Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Yasharal, Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried, and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus says Yahuwah Elohim, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves and bring you into the land of Yasharal, Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah when I've opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves." And then when you keep on reading, you read the part where he makes the two houses of Yasharal, Israel, one stick, one tree. That word stick is eights, tree. He makes the two one. So after we're resurrected, what happens? We become one new man. One new man. Okay, the man child. The two witnesses become one new man. The ones who typify Rachel are the house of Yehuda, those from the house of Judah that did not accept him before the harpazo, but they're told that they could still go and buy the oil of his name. So during those 10 days of all, if they go buy the oil of his name, they will be ready to meet him at the Mount of Olives. We read that in Zechariah 12:10. We also read it in Matthew 24:30 and in Revelation 1:7. Okay? In this prophetic pattern, Laban, symbolic of the father, said to Jacob, he says, "Finish the week with Leah, and I will give you Rachel also." I'm paraphrasing, of course. Okay. Jacob was also married to Rachel, who typifies the two southern tribes of Benjamin and Judah. At the end of the week, in other words, after 7 days with Leah, he also marries Rachel. He married Rachel and spent an additional 7 days with her. Therefore, Jacob's wedding to Leah and Rachel lasted for a total of 14 days. In other words, during the duration of all three fall feasts. We have trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles. This is all inside of 14 days, inside of 14 years. Okay? You see, on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, is when the house of Judah discovers if their names are written in the book of life. The Yehudim, the Jewish people, all also refer to Yom Kippur as face to face. Why do they call it face to face? Well, this will be the same day that Rachel, symbolic of the house of Judah, will see him face to face at the Mount of Olives. It's also when the high priest would go behind the veil in the temple once per year and he would come face to face with Yahuwah. It also is the same pattern as when Jacob wrestled with Yahuwah all night long. And it says he came face to face with Elohim. Okay? So this is when the bridegroom will remove the veil from the bride's face. In 2 Corinthians 3:16, the apostle Shaul is explaining those who do not accept Yahushua, but they read the Torah every Shabbat, right? He said, and not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look to the end of that which is abolished, but their minds were blinded, for until this day remains the same veil untaken away in the reading of the Old Testament, which veil is done away in Messiah. But even unto this day, when Moshe is read, the veil is upon their heart. Okay. Now, why did I bring this out? Because this custom of when the bridegroom removes the veil from the bride's face and he finally sees her face to face, that custom comes from an ancient Hebrew wedding. Remember, Rebecca, she saw Jacob coming towards them. She was taken to meet Jacob by the servant of Abraham, Eleazar. And when they were approaching, she said, "Who is this man in the field?" And he says, "It's my master's son, Yitzhak, Isaac." What did Rebecca do? She covered her face with a veil. Because why? This was an ancient Hebrew custom. The bride remained covered until they were about to consummate. And then, right at the moment that they're about to consummate, the bridegroom removes the veil from the bride's face. In other words, she finally sees him face to face. That's what Yom Kippur is all about. It's about, the word Kippur means atonement, but it comes from a root word, kafar, which means to cover. Okay? So, when the bridegroom removes the veil from the bride's face, they will finally be united. This is why Yom Kippur is referred to as face to face. The house of Judah will look upon him whom they have pierced, and it says they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. This is when the bride that typifies Rachel and also the kingdom of Judah and the foolish virgins, in other words, those who went and bought the oil of his name, they will be married to Yahushua. These are the remnant of the inhabitants of Jerusalem who did not take the mark of the beast, but they missed the harpazo on the Feast of Trumpets. They will have the opportunity to be married to the bridegroom on Yom Kippur at the second coming of Messiah, when every eye shall see him. Revelation 1:7. The two witnesses are the two olive trees and the two menorahs, the two candlesticks. Revelation 11:4. This means both houses of Israel and the two overcoming assemblies, which are Smyrna and Philadelphia. See, the name Smyrna means strengthened for myrrh. Rachel's maid, Bilhah, her name means trouble or tribulation. Smyrna must suffer tribulation for 10 days. Revelation 2:10. The name Zilpah, which is the name of Leah's maid, her name means dripping with myrrh. This means that Zilpah is a prophetic picture of those that are from Philadelphia. They have the oil of myrrh in their lamps, just like the 5 wise virgins. So you see, the congregation of Philadelphia represents Zilpah, the Gentile companion of Leah. Interestingly, Philadelphia is commended for not denying his name, the name of our Messiah. Revelation 3:8. Song of Solomon 1:3 likens the bridegroom's name to oil that is poured forth. Hence, the wise virgins love our Messiah and they know him by name. So you see, during these 10 days of awe, aka 10 days of tribulation, Smyrna will be like the 5 foolish virgins who must go and buy oil for their lamps. Matthew 25:9. Therefore, they are strengthened during these 10 days of awe. It is because they will finally anoint themselves with myrrh, just like Esther, who prepared herself to meet the bridegroom in Esther 2:12. Smyrna and Bila both represent the redeemed foolish virgins who will meet the bridegroom on Yom Kippur at the Mount of Olives. The 4 groups, in other words, the 2 olive trees and the 2 menorahs, mentioned in Revelation 11:4, they are symbolic of Leah and Rachel, in other words, both houses of Israel, and their 2 handmaidens, Bila and Zilpah. The 2 overcoming assemblies, Smyrna and Philadelphia, are the converts who join the 2 houses of Israel. They are symbolic of Rachel and Leah's 2 handmaidens. Okay? As I've already said in Ezekiel 37:4-14, it says that the army is the whole house of Israel. They will be taken up out of their graves and will be given incorruptible, immortal bodies. Ezekiel 37:16-19 tells us that this is when the stick or the tree of Judah and the stick or the tree of Joseph or Ephraim will be joined into one stick. In other words, one new man. Ephesians 2:12-15, also Revelation 12:4-5. These 2 witnesses are a corporate group from the kingdom of Judah, the Yehudim, the born-again Yehudim, and the Goyim, the Gentile believers who are grafted in. In other words, they are the whole body of Joseph, Ephraim, and Yehuda. Okay? The 2 menorahs, the 2 candlesticks, represent the corporate body of Gentile companions who are grafted into the 2 houses. These are Smyrna and Philadelphia. They shall be taken. They shall be caught up at the 7th trumpet when the 7th Malach, the 7th angel, sounds in Revelation 11:15. This is the first bride. She is typified in Leah. She is taken up to the wedding chuppah in heaven on the Feast of Trumpets. 5 more minutes and I'm going to stop here. Okay. The firstborn bride will be gone from the earth for 7 days inside the 10 days of awe, or inside those 10 days of tribulation that we read about in Revelation 2:10. Another pattern that can be seen is with Noah's family. They were taken inside the ark for 7 days before the wrath came in the form of rain. Genesis 7:4-10. At the end of these 10 days of tribulation, the firstborn bride of Messiah will return with him as his army. She will be clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Revelation 19:14 and also Ezekiel 37:10-11. To those that would argue, Deuteronomy 24:5, I already explained that one. The bride and groom will be fighting together. Therefore, he will not be leaving her all alone while he endangers his life at war. Okay? Both Messiah and his bride will have put on immortality. Therefore, there's no risk of either of them dying in battle, as there is with a mortal bride and bridegroom. The bride will put on incorruption. Therefore, she will be indestructible as the one new man. As I've already shown out of Ezekiel 37:10, it says, so I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. And, we see an artist's depiction here. We see all these people, that these valley of the dry bones, they're dead carcasses, skeletons. But now what happens? Yahuwah puts new skin on them, new flesh, new bones, new sinews. And he tells Ezekiel to prophesy over these dead bones, and they shall live. Of course, Ezekiel is seeing all of this in a vision, but this is referring to the future resurrection of the Kadoshim. And it says in Ezekiel 37:11, then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts. And as I already explained in Proverbs 31:10, the virtuous woman, this Hebrew word virtuous is Kail, which means an army. Also, in Bereshit, Genesis 2:18, Yahuwah Elohim said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. The Hebrew word for helpmeet is neged, which means a military front. So we're going to stop here. Next week, I will finish the rest of this. We will continue the chronological order of how these events will unfold. The 10 days of awe, from the 10 days between the Feast of Trumpets until the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. The first 3 of those 10 days, I believe, is when the 2 witnesses have their dead bodies laying in the streets. Revelation, 2:8, after which they are caught up, they are resurrected and taken up to the throne in heaven. Revelation 11:11 through 12, and also Revelation 12:5. So their bodies are laying in the streets, and then after 3.5 days they are resurrected. So that there's a total of 10 days, but inside the 10 days there are 7 days where the bride is in Shamayim, in heaven, with the bridegroom in the huppah, consummating. And then, of course, the day of wrath is Yom Kippur. It's when the bridegroom returns. Both houses of Israel, along with their Gentile companions that have been grafted in, they will be joined as one bride, in other words, one stick on Yom Kippur. The house of Yehuda will finally see their Messiah face to face at the Mount of Olives on this day. Zechariah 12:10. Meanwhile, the wicked people will be destroyed, and their bodies will become food for the birds of prey, according to Revelation 19:18 through 21. So we're going to stop here, and we'll continue with part 4 next week.
Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. We hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast and that you are encouraged in your walk with Messiah. For more teachings, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified of our latest content. Visit Maria's many blogs at doubleportioninheritance.com. That's doubleportioninheritance.com. This ministry is made possible by the prayers and support of listeners like you. To make a donation by PayPal or Venmo.com, use the email address doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. That's doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. On behalf of Maria and Gary at Double Portion Inheritance Ministries, may Yahuwah bless you.